And when I had finished talking about the things, some of the things I'll be sharing with you tonight, the dean of the medical school took me aside and he said, I want you to know that a lot of the things you've said are things we've been working hard on in the context of medical education. And he said about 6 years ago, we had a great struggle within our faculty to reform our curriculum. He said, you know, it's been the history in medical education that students preparing to be doctors will spend the first several years, 2 years at least, sitting in rows in auditoriums while someone up on the stage with a pointer who has a skeleton hanging from a rack there will go through the bones and ask people to memorize the bare bone facts of medicine. They have 2 years of that, he said, and then we all wonder why several years later we turn out doctors who treat living patients as if they were skeletons hanging from a rack to be analyzed into their component parts rather than real living human beings with organic reality and organic disease and organic possibilities. So he said, we decided to change our curriculum. We decided to create a curriculum in which from day one, the young men and women coming to study medicine with us would be gathered around a patient with a real problem. An 80-year-old man with the onset of Alzheimer's, a 60-year-old woman with potential breast cancer. In small groups, these students with a mentor present to help safeguard the well-being of the patient would gather to try to discern and to understand from the very first day of medical school what is going on in the midst of this human complexity and how one might treat it with some kind of healing force and power. He said, we were very concerned about the fact that all of our evidence showed that the compassion that brings people to medical school, very high levels of compassion motivating people to want to become doctors. The research showed us that at the end of 4 years of conventional medical education, those compassion measures were way down on the floor, that these young men and women had experienced a dehumanizing form of education which not only led them to treat patients in a dehumanized way, but led them also to have a dehumanized vision of themselves. So he said we instituted this new curriculum, but he said we did so over considerable opposition from a fair number of our faculty. And those faculty told us, he said, that we might get 2 good results out of this curriculum, but we'd get 1 real bad one. The good results would be that our students would have a higher sense of medical ethic. That would be to the good. Second good result would be that they would have a better bedside manner, a more humane way of being with patients. That would be to the good. But he said these faculty prophesied that the third negative result would outweigh all the rest. The test scores were going to go down. Their competence as doctors would decline. Their knowledge bank, their degree and amount of information would slip, and you would not want a doctor who didn't know what these people didn't know. And the dean got a small grin on his face. He says, 5 years later, guess what I can tell you? And I said, what? He said, not only has the bedside manner improved and the medical ethic gone up and the compassion been retained, but the test scores have actually risen. And I said, playing the role he wanted me to play, which was the one who didn't know, because he was so excited about telling me what he did know, and I was delighted to hear it. Do you know why? I said. And he said, yes, because we have now created the kind of educational circumstance in which real things are happening for real people about things they really care about, and those are the conditions under which people learn. Those are the conditions under which people get smarter faster. It's not that just that they get nicer. It's not just that they get softer, it's not just that they get smoother, it's that they get smarter faster. He said, we've had all kinds of wonderful byproducts of this. He said it used to be that when students, in a course, would be assigned a piece of reserved reading in the library, that somewhere in the first day or two, someone would snip that article out of the journal in order to gain competitive advantage over the next people who were going to come there and try to get it. But he said now, with a real patient at the center of all of these learning circles, our students are understanding that the information that they're asked to learn is not for the sake of competitive advantage over each other. It's for the sake of helping a real person with a real problem. And they're engaged with that ethically, not as an abstract ethical exercise, but as a motivation that's right at the heart of their wanting to learn to be doctors and to do medicine. Well, I think you can see why this has been a powerful story for me. It's not the dominant story in American medical education. It's not the dominant story in American higher education. But it is a story that is growing in size and in scope and in power among us. As educators in this country, students and teachers alike, wake up to the fact that we are a society in crisis, and we are in a crisis not only of compassion but of competence, and of the linkage between compassion and competence. And new models of education are developing to respond to this crisis. The story I have just told is about one of them. And for me, it's an exemplar story, a story that's full of energy that carries me often through some of the difficult times of struggle that all of us engaged in the movement for educational reform know about.